Afternoon, Damien, or Vas, as I probably won't stick to calling you Vas. Thanks for joining me on our early versions of the Maven interviews. Mate, to start us off, if you wouldn't mind, why don't you tell us about the Sniip journey from the early days of sticking QR codes on BCC bills back in the day to your exciting journey to where you are today?
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure being here. It seems that long ago. I have to remember where the journey started, but I think Sniip was born out of this sort of transition away from e-commerce to m-commerce, and we identified early on that there was going to be a gradual shift away from the dependence of people using a desktop or a laptop to transact towards the mobile device being able to be used for everything. And it was sort of as the iPhone became a staple for most people, not just professionals, but people were all accessing so much content and being able to do so much more on a mobile device, that we realized that the opportunity to be able to revolutionize the way that people transacted on a mobile was available for us to capitalize on in a way that hadn't been done well before. Previously, people had just used a mobile to create a smaller version of a web experience, and we wanted it to be a uniquely mobile payment experience. And our actual journey started out, our first iteration of Sniip as a company was as the provider of a white labeled solution for Dick Smith Electronics to do their mobile app, retail app. What we realized is that, okay, that might be a tough battle to fight, but where we really saw the breakdown in terms of being able to make a payment quickly was in billing. And we were seeing that, the advent of different ways for you to pay for something online was getting better and better. People paying at point of sale was getting better and better with Tap and Go, and then ultimately Apple Pay. You were getting all of this advancement in worlds around payments, but not specifically around invoice payment or bill payment. And so what we wanted to do was make the payment of a bill as painless as possible. It's not an experience people enjoy, like paying for a coffee or paying for a new pair of shoes, but let's make sure that it doesn't have to be painful. Let's make it more painless and get that payment done quickly, and also allow people to have a bit more control around the time in which they pay, instead of having, to put calendar reminders on to make sure that they don't pay late, because people don't want to pay early. And so we then came up with the QR code. The QR code was designed to capture the detail on the bill in a mobile environment and allow you to pay quickly. It was great technology for the time, even though people before COVID...
You were early.
Yeah.
I remember you're probably a bit early pre-COVID, but... Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is QR codes have been around for 10 years prior to that, but they had been done so badly that people had become quite sort of almost like apathetic towards using them, because all they were was a redirection to a URL or some website or some YouTube video or something else. Nothing great came out of scanning a QR code. And we said, we need to trademark our circular QR code so that people, when they see that, they don't confuse it with anything else other than payment. So the circular QR code was designed to be uniquely Sniip and say, if you point at this QR code, it's going to allow you to make a payment really quickly. You're going to stay in the native mobile environment. You're going to be able to pay, and we'll store your payment information so that you don't have to reload that every time. Idea was great. Execution was great. The experience was great, but the problem was we couldn't get critical mass. So we had great feedback from customers using it. We got Toowoomba Council, who was the first, funnily enough, Toowoomba Council was the first council to say yes to us, which was great for a startup to get that validation from a council who you wouldn't have thought would have been as progressive as a more, urban council. These guys had the right people. As you say, organisations are made up of people. You just need a person who actually is prepared to back you, and they did, and that gave us the opportunity to present to people in other government organisations with an example of how this works. We eventually got Brisbane City Council, which was massive, took us a long time. Queensland Urban Utilities, Sunshine Coast, Gympie, they were great large government billers, but at the end of the day, people won't change behaviour unless they can, have more reason to pay more bills with your method. We were struggling really to work out how we were going to expand, because going biller by biller, we just struck so much resistance. I mean, dealing with some government bodies, and I won't name them, but one particular government body, I had to speak to 19 different officials only to get an official response at the end to say, yeah, look, we've decided to retain the status quo.
I understand, mate. It's like dealing with a lot of the banks in fintech land. A lot of buying and engagement, but plenty of fintech businesses have done their pants trying to get engagement with.
Correct. But the funny thing is, you work out, well, if we've got this great technology and our path to actually achieving success with this company, from both, a traction point of view, but also from, a cash flow break even point of view, is dependent on this roadblock in between, which is the billing sector, who needs to embrace Sniip in order for customers to use Sniip. We realise we've got a problem here. We're dependent on a third party acceptance for us to get customers to use us. And we then realise, well, how are we going to get around that? How are we going to get billers to accept us when they take forever and they have these bizarre positions around engagement with their customer? They don't want any third party engagement with their customer because it could take them outside of their walled garden. And we want people to start to think about us as Origin Energy or RACQ or whatever. We don't want them thinking about Sniip. And I said, but the whole idea is that Sniip is about payments for every bill, not about paying your bill. And if you make people go into your environment to pay your bill, and they've got to do that for every bill in their life, they're going to have a phone full of apps, and you're going to make the experience terrible. They don't care, because their brand, as far as they're concerned, is bigger than everything. So if you keep hitting your head against a brick wall, you say, well, we've got to find a way around the brick wall. And so for us, we realised that we were trying to be an alternate payment option on the bill to BPay and Australia Post. But then we thought to ourselves, well, these guys have done so much of the hard work to get their position on an invoice. Why don't we utilise that? But instead of actually being an alternative payment option, let's make it an alternative payment experience and change the way that people actually go through the process of using that channel to pay. Because BPay is a great example of how the banks, when they work together, they do something pretty cool. They put BPay together. It was originally a Commonwealth Bank initiative that all the banks then became part of, and now BPay is universally accepted as a bill payment method for people to access through their bank. But that became a problem then for customers, because they could only access BPay payments through their banking platform. And then their banking platform would determine what payment options they could use. And of course, if you go through your banking platform, you can't use a card or a bank account from a different bank. You have to log into that bank and use that. So we said, well, how about we try and make this more of a customer focused payment experience with BPay? But to do that, we had to be a member of BPay, and we went through a process of being sponsored into BPay, accredited. Again, I talk really flippantly about this, but this was a process of 18 months, 2 years to get the accreditation, the approval, sponsorship. And eventually we became a member of BPay, the first what they call payer institution member of BPay, which meant we could access BPay payments for our customers, which meant that I didn't need to go and knock on billers' doors anymore. I had 70,000 billers nationally at my disposal with one agreement, which meant that I could tell my customers, don't worry about looking for the QR code anymore, because it's only on 4 billers' bills. So we'll just instead direct you to the BPay information. And we built the capability of being able to scan the BPay biller code and reference number and pull that data in rather than having to enter anything manually.
Big
So
milestone.
that was a big step change in our business. So we went from having 4 billers to 70,000 overnight. And that was where we actually then became what we call merchant of record in the transaction process. So what that allowed was people to use a payment option that they chose to pay Sniip, and Sniip agrees to pay their bill the way that the biller wants to be paid. So if your energy provider says you can only pay me via Visa and MasterCard or by bank transfer using BPay, we were saying to them, well, now if you want to use your American Express card, you can do that, because we'll take your American Express payment and we'll charge you a fee to use it, but that's okay. Your bill will be paid the way that the biller wants to be paid. As far as you're concerned, you're using your Amex to pay your bill. And that changed our world, because we started to get noted by the customer as a alternative payment option to going through someone's bank or going direct to the biller, and using whatever payment option, whatever bank account, whatever bank card they wanted to use. So it was about changing the mentality of a bill payer from I have to pay the way the biller tells me to pay or the way the bank tells me to pay to I'll pay the way I want to pay.
And did you find that any customer demographic difference in this? You know, as a more, older generation might be just ingrained in the way they use, BPay, compared to a younger audience that, naturally lend themselves to want to do what they want to do. Did you see any of those behaviours, on the customer side? Because you kind of solved the supplier side. What about at the customer side?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think you got this balance of digital natives who, are expecting to do everything on their mobile, but that digital native demographic has actually grown up hearing about the evils of credit card, and
absolutely.
So we were sort of like probably never going to appeal to a sort of 20-something audience, because most of them only have debit cards, and for them, they were really, not not out of home, not paying a lot of their own bills, and as you and I both know, that we would have moved out of home a lot earlier than a lot of these kids who are still at home and the parents are paying the bills. Then the parents who have credit cards and want to earn points, for example, they're not necessarily as digitally native. But I think the smartphone has actually bridged the gap between people. Like my late father, I remember he was far more conversant with how to use an iPhone than he was using a laptop. And so
that's true. My mum's the same, actually. Still with us, but that's true.
So we were able to get people around the idea of being able to use their phone, because we made it, the phone itself is quite intuitive. We made the app super user friendly to be able to make it point and shoot. It was really easy, to load a card. We then, made even more advances around introducing Apple Pay and Google Pay. So you could actually, now you can log in and create an account through your Apple ID or your Google ID. And we know that you've got Apple Pay or Google Pay on your phone. So you don't even need to load a payment option. You literally can double click and pay a bill the same way you pay for a loaf of bread at Woolworths. We were the first payment partner of Apple Pay globally for bill payments. So I think turning on BPay, having a strategic merchant arrangement with American Express allowed us to go out to American Express customers who want to be able to use their American Express and earn points, but haven't been able to access a whole heap of payments, especially in bill payments, because not a lot of billers offer American Express. And so here they were being able to use all of their card payments for their what they call the non-discretionary payments. They could maybe buy some stuff at the shop or pay for some retail goods, but they couldn't pay for their household bills with an American Express. Now they could. So this was opening up the bill payment market for American Express customers, because I think there was only like 500 to 1,000 billers nationally that accepted American Express, we opened up 70,000 BPay billers. So that
Makes
was a huge
sense.
change. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
huge change for us because we partnered with American Express. We went out to their customer base. In terms of our customer acquisition strategy, it was around channeling a lot of those customers through their Amex Offers program. And then, you know, if I'm going to skip ahead, the biggest change in most recent times, about November 23, just about 18 months ago, we had worked out before this that yes, we have always, our mission has always been to allow every Australian to pay every bill using any payment method on their terms. So we wanted to open up bill payments for everyone to use any payment option they wanted and pay the way they wanted to. So we knew that we had done part of that with opening up BPay, but there was 2 million small businesses in Australia that don't offer BPay, and they have invoices sent out to customers every day. And customers of ours were saying to us, we love using Sniip, can we pay the non-BPay bills with it? And we had to build technology to read invoice data and convert that into a digital format the same way we do with every other BPay bill. So that took a lot of work from our dev team. And when we went through a period of, you know, as every startup does, real austerity measures where you can't spend money on customer acquisition, you can't really expand your company, but we kept our staff. We just basically had a freeze on staff. We kept our team in place and we doubled down on our tech. And what we did was we really built good technology to read invoices, extract data, and to be able to digitize any invoice from, you know, your tax bill or your rates bill from a government issued provider to an invoice that's handwritten by the guy that might mow your lawns. And, and that means that we've homogenized the bill payment experience, and we've actually changed our call to action to customers to not say pay your rates and water bill or even pay any bill that has BPay on it, but to pay every bill with Sniip. So our huge volume growth in the last 2 years has not come necessarily from a huge growth in our customer numbers, because we haven't had the budget to be able to tell people necessarily how good we are and that we even exist. But it's come from our customers paying more and more bills, because now we've opened up their entire bill payment world to Sniip.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you've touched on, mate, some of the underlying, you know, technology options, etc. You know, when you got committed to a journey that, you know, some of which you've been talking about, would you get, you know, you tend to get nervous on these because new technology is coming out in payments, various changes have occurred along the way beyond just mobile QR, etc. Did you have your moments along there where things would arrive and you'd get nervous and have to, you know, pick strategic targets, etc.? I mean, I'll give you an example. When I was doing On the House years ago, you know, it was all sort of guns pointed at trying to disrupt REA, Fairfax, RP Data, and then out of the blue, Google says, "Oh, we're doing real estate." You know, I remember I was still lawyering early in that stage, raising money, and I had to lie on the floor for a while and, you know, try and work out where to go. And Bree spent time looking at what they were up to and realised that's not actually going to work, or it's not going to be a threat, and ultimately it wasn't. But, you know, those sorts of moments, you know, talk me through. Did you have some of those where, you know, there were defining moments where you said, you know, that's going to work, that, you know, I need to double down on this initiative?
Look, probably too many to count, Fredo, but I will say to you that when we did launch Sniip and partnered with BPay, I remember someone from BPay saying this is probably the app that BPay should have built themselves.
Yes.
But the thing is that BPay is owned by the big four banks, and the big four banks have different priorities. Payments are not their business. Payments are a function of their business, but their primary income stream comes from home loans and insurance products and, you know, credit card issuing and all that. So for them, they don't want to have someone go and pay their bills in an environment that's not part of the banking world for them. because that could disassociate them from the brand that they want them to engage more with. So BPay was never going to be its own brand. It's only ever a product for the banks. So I wasn't so much worried about the banks because I knew that that wasn't their first priority. I suppose the billers themselves who try and offer a unique experience with their own native app to pay their bills, like a Telstra, for example, that's great. But people have more than one bill to pay, so that's never been a threat to us. I think we've always worried about whether or not there'll be a payment experience from, say, an Apple or a Google that could make life...
Even a Revolut or one of those everything finance kind of scenarios?
Yeah, look, I think the one thing is that we made a decision. We had a lot of opportunities in our early days to be payment verticals that were not billing. And I remember it was very, very tempting because people were trying to get us to do QR code payments at music festivals to allow people to just carry their phone in and just point and shoot and pay for something over the counter. People wanted us to use technology that was, combining our QR code with RFID. They wanted all sorts, and when you're struggling to sort of get traction in, as I said, we were trying to get billers on board, and that was proving to be difficult. So when people come at you with opportunities outside of what you think is your core business, but it's going to be a quick win and a sugar hit, you're tempted to change your strategy to meet the opportunity. But what happens is if you get distracted, you then become, you lose that identity. And we made a decision, instead of being all different payment types for all different sectors, we said we will be the best in billing and invoice payments, and we will make this a truly unique user experience from a payer point of view, so that every biller wants to get paid quickly, because Sniip makes payments so easy that I'm going to get paid on time. And we were getting a lot of our data out of Brisbane City Council saying that people were paying 92% prior to the due date, compared to the national average, which was 76% before the due date, which was clear to us that if you make payments easy to make, people generally want to pay you on time. The harder you make payments to make, the more steps they've got to go through, the more time they've got to put aside to pay, people will pay late. And so we said, no, we're going to keep drilling down and get better and better at invoice payments. So to some extent, we created a bit of a moat for ourselves in that we built technology that allows us to read invoice data, make payments available to everyone with every payment option. We don't see anyone else doing what we do better than we do without having 10 years in the game like we have, because it takes not just the technology build, but the accreditation, the partnership arrangements. It's the recipe that that I think only a startup could do, but we're so far ahead in terms of time in market that we feel as though we probably have built that adequate moat. So you always worry about threats. There are other people playing in the payment space around bill payments on a desktop for businesses to be able to use credit cards, and we know that. We knew that coming in. But no one has done this in the consumer space, and no one's done it on a mobile device the way we have done it. So we are both consumer bill payments and business bill payments. We have a mobile version, we have a web version. So basically we are wanting to be seen ultimately as, the almost the verb that people use for bill payments outside of going direct to a biller or using their banking platform. We say, oh, well, just snip that bill. And we want it to be a verb used by billers and by payers, because what our next, I suppose, iteration of the company will be, and that is that we're now completing integrations into all of the accounting software platforms, so that an invoice can be issued to a customer from the biller directly via push notification into the Sniip app, so that they're getting the bill directly to the place where their payment credentials are all stored. so that, you can pay that bill quickly. You can manage that bill. You can schedule it for the due date without having to pay it straight away.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just thinking, what does the end result look like for you guys? But you're really just explaining it.
Yeah, I think ultimately we talk about closing this loop. And the reason why we want to close the loop is because we believe that we've got the best tools for a business to be able to digitally transmit an invoice and know that the genesis of our company came from creating the best user experience for a person paying a bill. So a lot of companies that have been out there selling technology to businesses to be able to distribute invoices haven't actually focused their attention on, well, when it gets to the customer, what's the experience like to pay that invoice? Well, that's our bread and butter. That's what we started out life doing, creating the best payment experience for a customer paying a bill. So we've solved that part. Now we're retrofitting the sort of business side to make sure that it doesn't even need to be done in a manual way from a customer to upload the invoice or even connect their email account. They're just going to get the invoices sent to them by the biller themselves, because we're getting now. I'll give you an example. The government department that that I couldn't get to agree to put QR codes on the bill. We went around them, obviously, with the advent of the BPay partnership, and they're now our third largest individual number of invoices paid annually.
Right.
And that biller doesn't even know that people are paying them through Sniip.
Yeah, right.
So I can go back to that biller and every other biller and say, I don't know if you realise this, but your customers are using Sniip.
I was going to say, I assume you're telling them.
Not yet, but we will, because what we want to have is the full suite of products for them to actually initiate the bill delivery to the customer via Sniip.
Yeah, right.
So that we close that loop. So if you're getting the bill from the very place where you're receiving, where you're paying the bill, then you don't have any opportunity to get out of that closed loop. So we want to control bill delivery to bill payment, and it's seamless.
Understood. Vax, why don't we shift to some of the soft stuff?
Yeah.
Founders, you've been at this a long time. I think you mentioned 11 years. When it comes to thinking about tenacious founders, you're one of the names that comes to mind for me. What's that like? What's it take to be a founder and stick it at your knitting like this, and being true to your North Star and having that discipline, as you talked about, as a ubiquitous solution for bills for that long?
Well, I think the first thing I'll say is I've always tried to surround myself with people that are smarter than I am, and they make me look good because I have a vision, but I'm very, very incapable of delivering the things that I think should happen. So the first thing you do is find those people that can actually connect the dots from what you see as happening. And I give myself credit for being able to see what I think we need to do, but that doesn't get you very far if you can't do it. So
sure.
I think I've really tried to make sure that I've got capable people around me, and I've been very, very fortunate. I've got some superstar people that have been by my side, especially my CFO, who's been with me from day one, and he's very much the heart and soul of the business. But from a founder point of view, who's put everything that they have into a company, I will say it's super spooky when things get so close to the edge that you say to yourself, what are my options now? Do I fall on my sword and say, look, I had a go and it didn't work? Or do I find some other way to be able to keep this thing alive? And I've probably had 4 or 5 near-death experiences along the way because, to raise the money to keep companies going when there's no revenue coming in, it requires people to take a leap of faith on you as a person and to believe you. They back the person. And I say this often to people when I talk about the journey of a startup founder. I truly believe that and I'm not saying this is a hard and fast rule, but I threw away Plan B when I started Sniip. And if I had a Plan B, I reckon I would have called on it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a lawyer by training, just like you, Fredo, but I never practiced. So I can't go back into the law because I'd never practiced in the law. So it wasn't like I had a job waiting for me. I knew that if I didn't make this work, there was no Plan B to go to. So when that happens, they say necessity is the mother of invention. If you don't have a Plan B, you've got to make Plan A work. So
Yep.
find ways to somehow get through. And part of that desperation that you have to make Plan A work is what makes investors back you, because they know that you've got more to lose than they have. They might be giving you some investment capital, but they know that they can still get by if that doesn't eventuate into anything.
Yeah.
But if you don't make this work, then, you know, life is very different for you. And if you can convince investors that your interests are aligned, yep, I'm going to make your money worth more than what it is, because without that, I'm basically out of a job and I'm out of a home and I'm destitute. So yeah, our interests are aligned. Yes, I've got more to lose, but at the end of the day, I'm as motivated to make your money work as anyone, because if it doesn't, I'm screwed. So the notion of desperation sometimes comes across poorly to investors if you're in a, you know, talking to an institution who, you know, you're saying, you know, we really need your capital, and that doesn't necessarily augur well for an investment from an institutional type investor. But for a high net worth investor that wants to back an entrepreneur, they like to see that desperation. They want to know that someone's hungry, and that's where it comes in.
That makes sense. I was, you know, as you know, I think I've raised roughly 100 million over for the two businesses that I was involved in. None of that was ever VC, PE, or institutional, really. Most of it was entrepreneurial guys that could see your vision, but more importantly, you know, if you ever had a conversation with them about why, it was always you and your belief in the vision as a founder and passion, you know. Yes. And then you start getting a few decent people around you as well. That helps. So they're backing that. They can see that, which tends to be entrepreneurial individuals, often very high net worth entrepreneurial people who've been through the journey before. Yeah. And you know, I started it when I was a partner in a large law firm, and obviously you get your first initial checks from relationships, but it wasn't until I let that go that people started backing you. You know, unfortunately, you've got to have everything on the line. Just tends to be the nature of the animal, right?
That's right.
So, you know, your superpower is that perseverance, and you know, I was going to say it's best the guy with the best hair in fintech. You know.
Thanks. Well, I got it cut because it was getting a bit long. So
I was going to say I've seen it longer.
It's almost like a crew cut now for me.
Yeah, my dream was to have grey hair, you know, to have hair on my head long enough for it to turn grey, but that was never to be.
No, that look suits you. Yeah, I can't imagine you any other way now.
No, thank you, mate. And then finally, I've taken up a lot of your time, but
not at all.
Dream shareholder. If you got to pick a dream shareholder, who would it be?
Oh, well, I do have it.
Other than your existing ones, who obviously be
the great Darren.
and you've got Darren Lockyer, of course.
Yeah, so. Well, not only is he a dream shareholder because he invested his own money, has given his time to help with, you know, branding around the company. He every year he judges a colouring in contest for our Easter competition with his kids. But he's probably the most prolific user of the app. You know, he pays every bill with Sniip. He gives us great feedback. So he is pretty good. You know, if I could pick one, it'd probably be him.
Vast, hey, thank you. It's been a pleasure to watch your journey, and obviously even more enjoyable to watch the success you're having. And keep going, brother. Keep going.
Thank you, Fredo. Thank you, and I appreciate all your support over many years. And yeah, and someone who's been there and done that before, it's always good to hear your stories. And you know, I get great tuition from you over many conversations. And the one thing that I will say is that people like you have a catalogue that needs to be shared just as much as the stories that people like me tell, because every founder experience is different, and it's a challenge. And every time you hear a different challenge, you're better prepared if you want to go out and do it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of what this channel is about, and obviously what I'm trying to do is share real life experiences from the trenches.
We owe it to the next generation to share that, don't we?
Agreed. Good on you, mate. Thanks again. Talk soon.
Good chatting. Take care. See you, Freda.